Hi, Hugh Halter again, and I want to tell you a story and kind of lead into the incarnational community structure a little bit. A couple of years into our time in Denver, Matt and I had went on a mountain bike ride with a guy named Chris, and we had been invited by another community just to kind of get to know him a little bit. Chris hadn't done much in the way of church, but a couple days after this mountain bike ride, he was at one of the parties of one of our community leaders. And I walked in, and Chris was there with his girlfriend that he had brought, and he flagged me over, and he said, "Hey, come here." He goes, "So, like, what's going on with everybody here?" And there was probably 30, 40 people in the house at the time. And I acted like I didn't know what he was talking about. I said, well, "I'm not sure what you're meaning, Chris." He goes, "Well, I think there's something going on other than just a party here, right? Like, you guys are about something, aren't you?" And I said, "Chris, you're probably picking up on the fact that we're all part of the same faith collective here in Denver." I made that name up at the time. And he goes, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, it's kind of like a church. We just have communities all over Denver, and we try to live our lives in the way of Jesus and be a blessing to people and that type of thing." And he goes, I knew it had something to do with God." He goes, "I was telling the girl that I brought tonight that out of all the friends that I have in Denver, I've gotten to where I'd rather be with these people than any of my own friends." And so last video, we talked a lot about some shifts in the culture and what's been happening. And we basically said, 50 years ago, the church was kind of in the center of culture. And we shared a lot of similar values and ways of life. And so we could simply attract people to our churches, and everything was going pretty good. We also showed, though, that that's not the case anymore, that the church is really off on the margins now of society. We don't have these to have. And unlike the early church that was off on the margins because of persecution, our churches tend to be outside the normal cultural influential position because of sort of irrelevance or what people perceive about us or assumptions that they have about us. And so when we talked about all those sort of negative assumptions, we recognize that those are barriers to people understanding the gospel. And so what is really needed is not just one good Christian. In fact, one good Christian isn't really enough to help people get past all these negative assumptions. What's needed is a community of people like Chris saw, where they go, I respect, I'm drawn to all those people. So in the Tangible Kingdom Primer, we actually have a page called The Power of Us, We, and Them. And what we're trying to show in that is that when you read the book of Acts and when you hear some of the early historical kind of pictures of the early communities of faith, you actually begin to see that it was the community that was the witness of the gospel. It wasn't an individual anymore. And so as you actually pick up on the fact that people actually watched the community. They would watch how they would sell all their possessions. They would watch how they would gather consistently, how they hung on the teachings of the apostles, how they cared for each other, how they loved people, how they included people that had never been able to be a part of the Christian or even the Jewish community. So lots of sort of witnesses of what those people did, not just individual people. And there's a scripture in Acts that says that people held them in high respect, but many were afraid to join. And so the picture you get there is that there was a sort of an aspect of intimidation. Like, you look at those people and you go, I'm not sure if I really want to live the life that they live, because it might cost me a lot. It might cost me my life. But there was also, even though there was an intimidating aspect, almost even a scary part of what it would be like to be a part of them, there was also this incredibly inspiring aspect. And so right after, it says that they held him in high respect and were afraid to join him, it says, and yet many were added to the church. So you get this idea that you're going to need more than just one person. You're going to need a whole community of people to give witness to the good news of the gospel. And so we moved into actually formalizing a sense of community. And that's where most of you are going to have to go. So if your friends are moving towards your life, they're starting to process questions and concerns, some of them might even be coming to faith, they're not going to quickly make a jump right to your church. In fact, they're probably not going to want to be a part of a larger Christian context for quite a while. So you're going to have to provide almost like a lily pad environment called the incarnational community, where you can begin to disciple and draw them deeper into kingdom life. And so we essentially did that. And that became sort of the incarnational community. We had a meeting every Saturday night for a while, and there started to be some consistency to our time. We also started to add, like I said, a spiritual element. So we would actually have a talk about life and God. We still would do lots of parties. We'd still go out and help people. But we essentially were beginning to model what we already talked about as kind of a three-circle experience. Now, a common question we have that people ask us all the time is, what's the difference between a small group and an incarnational community? It's simply this, is that most small group experiences are what we would call a one-circle experience.